One of the things that brings me the most fulfillment on a day-to-day basis within my job is being able to help people who are in chronic pain get out of that over time. Now, while I do own a gym, my passion and what I'm really focused on is helping people feel better who have a bunch of injuries built up, and they've seen a bunch of physical therapists, they've seen a bunch of different practitioners like chiropractors, and they can't seem to make things stick or make a meaningful change. I have a couple of case studies on my YouTube channel helping a couple of people through those if you want more detail on that, and I have many more coming in the future. But I wanted to make some recommendations because I've seen some comments of people requesting, well, what should I do in my situation? Now, everyone's an individual and they need an individualized approach because of that, but there are common themes I see with people that suffer from chronic pain and tend to have a lot of problems within their movement from head to toe. The biggest problem I see with people that are in chronic pain is that they have a lot of tension within their body and they have a very sympathetic nervous system. This means that they are walking around in some sort of relative level of a fight or flight response. Their body fears movement, and that's understandable because they really haven't been able to move in a way that has them not feel pain. And that's very understandable because a lot of these people can't really do much without feeling some degree of pain. So what happens is when we have a sympathetic nervous system response is we move into extension. If you were to stand up and puff your chest out, you immediately feel more alert. You extend your spine. This is a position of either run or fight. And if that builds over time and over time and over time, the center of mass gets pushed more and more forward onto the toes. And because the human body, as I mentioned in other content, is concerned with keeping an even center of mass down the midline of the body, what tends to happen is that this thoracic spine moves into a lot of kyphosis to help even ourselves out. And that doesn't mean this person doesn't have a lot of extension tone, it's just that they're trying to create balance within that center of mass and within their spine. So one of the first steps we take, and what's extremely helpful for people, is moving out of extension and trying to get them into more of a flex position. Because if you exhale very long and just kind of sigh the air out, you move into more flexion naturally. And that also helps calm you down a little bit. So this is a really important consideration right off of the bat. Now, there are a lot of different ways we can do that, and creating a parasympathetic response is massively important for so many different reasons, and that is a priority of mine in many of my programs, like Beginner Body Restoration, within my Shoulder Health ebook, within my Anterior Pelvic Tilt ebook, and a lot of my programs. Here's an example of an exercise we can do to help move people into flexion and help create a more parasympathetic response, which also helps get the extension tone out of the body. For this, we need usually an exercise ball, something blown up, or some pillows, whatever works as long as it's a little bit compressible so you can push into it. But ideally, it's big enough so where you can keep your hips stacked over your knees, but it's not pushing you too far forward than that. So whatever works, that's about this size right here. And we need to make sure that we're in this quadruped position, so our hands are also underneath our shoulders. Now, what we're gonna do here to start is round our back pretty aggressively as we exhale through our mouth and push into that ball right there. So we're gonna have a big sort of cat, if we're thinking cat camel here, the cat position is gonna be here. And then we're gonna hold that as we inhale through our nose, and we're gonna feel our upper back and mid back really open up with air. And then as we exhale again, we're gonna press into that ball, and we're gonna feel a ton of lower abs. We need to maintain that ab contraction, especially the side abs, and we need to maintain this position right here of the back as we inhale through the nose. And then we're gonna do reps of that for about 5 breaths. The most common mistake by far on this is people are gonna shrug their shoulders into their ears as they do that. Please don't do that. That's gonna kick on your neck more so. So make sure that you're getting that push, but still keeping your traps relaxed as you go through this. Another great way you can facilitate parasympathetic input would be through a side lying position, because the side lying position sort of represents the fetal position. It's a very grounded and safe position. So this allows us to repattern better respiration mechanics and also not have to worry about much else because we are very grounded. That's also going to allow us to get more neutrality and stack of the rib cage over the pelvis. But we're gonna do this in the 90-90 position. So I'm gonna have Trevor scoot a little bit closer, and we have something underneath his head, like a yoga block, that allows his cervical spine and neck to be 100% neutral and straight ahead. It shouldn't be bending you one way or the other. Now, we just need to keep the feet flat on the wall, and for some people, they might need a little slight tuck of their pelvis, meaning if their pelvis is a bowl of water, it's now spilling out the front, or the back excessively, it's nice and parallel with this wall right here. So because in this position, we're going to be coaching breathing and how to do it really effectively, that's what we're going to be focusing on. So what we're going to be doing here is just a nice, soft, long exhale through the mouth, almost as if you're sighing. And you're going to do that for 5 to 10 seconds. At the end of that exhale, you're going to feel your side abs engage, particularly on this top side right here. Now, hold that tension in your side abs and close your mouth, and then put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Inhale through your nose very slowly. It should be a silent inhale. I should not be able to hear it for about 5 seconds, and you're going to feel your ribs open up. And then exhale through the mouth again. So a full one will look like full exhale, sigh it out until you feel a little bit of the side ab tension, 5 to 10 seconds. Pause, tongue on the roof of the mouth with the mouth closed. Keep a little bit of that side ab tension. Inhale through the nose. And that's all this is. It's nice and chill. There should be no tension. And a general idea is that I should hear you exhale, but I should not hear you inhale. The only thing to really look out for here is to make sure you're not shrugging your shoulders and your ears. Keep them out and relaxed. And also make sure that your shoulder here isn't rolled back or forward. You want it stacked on top of that hip. If you read a book like The Oxygen Advantage, which is a fantastic read, they talk about how when people tend to have this short, shallow breathing pattern, which is paired with that sympathetic response, they can't tolerate CO2 very well. So when you exhale and you hold that pause, your first sort of hunger for air isn't because you need oxygen, it's because you can't tolerate CO2 building up within your system, and that can create a little bit of that panicked response. So if you're constantly using short, shallow breathing, even if it's unconscious, you have that going on a baseline level, a subconscious level. One thing we've been doing more this year is helping people actually train this and doing what we call controlled pause breathing. An example of that would be a nasal inhalation for 2 seconds, a nasal exhalation for 2 seconds, and then holding that pause for about 6 to 10 seconds, and doing that for about 15 minutes while you walk, watch TV, or whatever you can do while you can still maintain that track of time. And over time, that pause should start to get easier and easier. But we don't want to go to the point where we feel panicked. We want to work within our means. And so doing that for about 15 minutes a day can go a really long way to help get tone out of the body and control more of this parasympathetic nervous system response. What goes hand in hand getting tone out of the body is to help bring the center of mass back and to help get the pelvis and the rib cage in a more neutral position. That way we can move in and out of flexion and extension and rotate as we need to instead of being stuck in one position. So one way we can do that, depending on the person, is to get them into more of either a posterior pelvic tilt or anterior pelvic tilt, depending on where they're coming from. Now, if you have more of an anterior pelvic tilt, more of an anterior orientation of the pelvis, one thing you can do is to help improve your hip extension. Hip extension would mean the pelvis coming underneath you, because back extension is this, hip extension is that. So we want to get after this and restore this range of motion. Here's the way you can do that. To set up for this, we need to be on some sort of elevated surface like a table, and that needs to allow us to have our feet dangling off of it without touching the floor and our knees bent at about a 90-degree angle. And we should have the rest of our body flat. Now, the important thing here is that we need to be able to have some sort of elevation, like a foam roller is usually a good starting place for most people, and keep it underneath the mid to upper hamstring with the glutes flat and the low back completely flat and relaxed. That's the biggest key. If you feel like your ribs are flaring at all, or the low back is not completely flat and 100% relaxed, you need more elevation underneath this foam roller. A way you can get more elevation would be to roll up the foam roller in something like a towel, or just have a towel rolled up and roll more towels on top of that. So what we're going to do to initiate this is just gently press down with one leg, about a 3 to 4 out of 10 intensity. And we're gonna make sure that we're keeping the knee in line with the hip. If it's rolling out to the side, that's no good. We gotta make sure it stays perfectly in line. And then we're going to pull the other leg back to the point where the knee is pointing directly up at the ceiling. If you're feeling any hip flexor on this leg, maybe back off a little bit, but generally speaking, it should be right about here. Now, we should still feel the low back 100% relaxed. Now we're going to inhale through the nose and extend the knee, and then exhale through our mouth and come back down nice and controlled. Good, controlled tempo and pace here. We're gonna feel the quad on this leg, the hamstring on this downside leg right here. We're gonna do that for about 10 to 15 reps. So here's the other really important part is, as we progress through this drill, over time, we should be able to use less and less elevation. or work into more hip extension over time. So the question is what's the least amount of elevation I need to still keep my low back 100% relaxed and keep this knee in line with the hip? So over time, what you can do is get this thing moved further away. That's gonna put you in more hip extension. For people that have more of this sway back posture, again, what tends to happen is their center of mass goes so far forward that they tend to create a lot of tightness on the backside of the body because the body senses, oh man, I'm going too far forward. I need to grip stuff on the backside of the pelvis to help pull me down and under. So we get a lot of compression around that area. So we want to help open up this space right here, the backside of the pelvis, the outlet, and then we can start to retrain better hip extension. To set up for this, we need something that's about waist height, or we're gonna use a wall as we'll show you in a second, but we want a ball or some sort of object we can keep in between the knees so our knees stay perfectly in line with our toes and our hips. The ball should not be too wide so it's shoving our knees out. It's gotta be perfectly in line there. So a pillow folded in half could also work, but we wanna approach this object and get about a foot's length distance away from it. And we want to make sure that our feet are hip width apart. So they need to be perfectly stacked underneath our hips and they need to be perfectly straight ahead. We don't want the toes flaring out or in. Okay, so maintaining the weight evenly distributed through the foot, what we're going to do is slightly unlock the knees, bend the knees slightly. Okay, now we're going to put our hands on that thing. And what we're gonna do is try to push our center of mass back and almost like we're doing a deadlift or a hinge-like action. And we're gonna stop once we feel a little bit of a stretch in our back glute area right here. So around here is where we're gonna wanna stop. The important thing is that we're keeping a flat back. We don't want to overly extend the spine. We want to keep it nice and neutral, nice and flat. That being said, we also don't wanna overly flex it. So make sure that, and you might need to look at yourself in a mirror or record yourself, make sure that you have a nice flat back. That's gonna help open up the space back here. And then we're gonna breathe in through our nose, out through our mouth, nice and long for about 5 to 10 breaths. Another option we may have you do is use a wall to help push yourself and your center of mass back. So you're gonna have to get a couple of feet away from the wall, but you're gonna have to play around with it depending on the person. And again, it's the same thing. You just wanna keep your weight mostly in your heels, knees are slightly unlocked, push your center of mass back, right about there, keep your head slightly up so it's nice and neutral and breathe in that position. This may help you feel that stretch back there more. The most common mistake on this is people are gonna lean too far forward as they go forward, so they're gonna lose their heels, and they actually might start feeling it in their back. So you're gonna open up the back space in your hips if your weight's more in your heels, but your toes aren't lifting off the ground. So whole foot's flat, but weight is going to be mostly in your heels as you go back. The other thing is people go too deep. If they do that, they're gonna start rounding their back too much here, and they're not gonna get that stretch. So make sure that you're just going deep enough to where you can keep your back flat and you can still feel and find the stretch back there. So those would be my 3 recommendations. To summarize, we need to facilitate better parasympathetic input and get extension tone out of the body through that first exercise. The second thing we need to do is, over time, start to be able to tolerate CO2 and be able to train a better controlled pause. And the third thing, depending on how this person presents, is improve the neutrality of the pelvis. And we can do that through promoting opening of the outlet through sway back people. And we can do that through improving hip extension with people that have more of this anterior pelvic tilt. So give those things a try. Do that for about 2 to 4 sets a day. I recommend for maximal efficiency 2 sets in the morning, 2 sets at night of about 5 to 8 breaths, really slow and controlled. And if you're struggling with the breathing, I have a video specifically on that that I'll link up above.